so well. And congratulations on being such a standout character of this season as well. You definitely lit up the screen and was like a pleasure to watch you play.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I just watched the episode about an hour ago, and I'm like so fascinated for your perspective. Have you still been able to make, I don't know, understanding of what happened to that tribal council? Because it just seems crazy and like proper crazy. Even Jeff is saying we haven't seen anything like this before.
Yeah, it was truly chaotic. I mean, watching it on I think watching Survivor and playing Survivor are two very different sports. And so I think that, watching it, I've seen Q kind of explode that way and be like, I want to quit, I want to quit. Then he comes back and he might be like, it was all strategy. But being in that moment and not having that information or insight, I was just like, what is happening? Why is he trying to quit? Where is he trying to go? Why is he doing this? This is kind of blowing up multiple people's strategy. So I just found myself very perplexed. And now there's a live tribal. So the fan in me is so enthused and excited that there's a live tribal happening. But then the player in me is like, what is happening? Like trying to get the votes back on track because I think that we all need to vote together because each vote compounds to the next vote, so that we can start building trust as a unit, specifically as the six. And it was just a chaotic tribal. It was very, very chaotic, and it's very difficult to make sense of.
Yeah, it was incredibly chaotic. And I don't know how you're feeling in the midst of that because in your mind, heading into that tribal, is it just Tiff and it's a pretty straightforward vote for you?
I mean, for me, yeah, I mean that's what I thought. Because I mean that's kind of how I had interpreted, Q playing the game. I mean, when he said that's who we're going for, that's who we're going for. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So I was like, okay, Q's kind of leading this vote, and he wants to go
Yeah.
after his number one. I mean, let's do it. So I had no reason to believe that it wouldn't be that because Q is in charge of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting and talk about Q being in charge. Was that a deliberate strategy by you in that moment to take a step back after the soda vote? Like you've had this moment of a huge achievement, getting out soda, taking the credit for that, which I think manifested on the show, and then taking a step back and saying, "All right, let someone else drive. It's not going to be just my voice every time."
That was absolutely part of my strategy. And one of the things that you didn't see on the show is that when the immunity challenge ended between me and Maria on the water challenge, when I swam over to the platform, Q pulled me up out of the water, and Q said, he whispered in my ear and he said, "Vote Venus." So when he told me to vote Venus, I guess in that moment I was like, "Oh, this is great. I have a plan. I know what I'm gonna do." And then when I got back to camp, the more I thought about it, I said, "Q's not gonna tell me what to do." And so I said, I need to make a move now
Yeah.
that is a move that I want to do that is not what Q told me to do. So when I get to the end, I have something that I can say other because Q is gonna have so much he can say because he's clearly running this game. So I wasn't gonna let him run me. So I said I'm gonna make this big move with Soda. Ironically, him telling me to vote Venus ensured that Venus didn't go home that night in that moment. And then after I did Soda, I said I'm going to the back. I'm going to let Q run this little show, and then I'm going to emerge later once Q's made himself such a big target, and then I'm going to swing and take him out.
Yeah, look, I don't think I think that's a really good strategy. And I'm still a little bit perplexed how it ended up being you. It came through, I guess, the situation with Liz. You guys seem really close. You seem like there was a long-standing relationship. And I guess the show manifested and demonstrated it through the lens of, all right, she doesn't want to take a back seat. How have you processed, I guess, the move against you in that moment?
I guess in that moment, I what wasn't shown. So Liz and Hunter and I had a three-way alliance that we built pretty early on in the game, and Liz and I had a personal connection because we had a very deep conversation that we shared early on in the game as well. And based on that conversation, this is why Liz was able to slip past me that way. I never in a million years thought Liz would write my name down, and I never thought I was gonna have to write her name down, or I didn't think about that because of that conversation that we
Mm.
had. So I was shocked that that was something that she had done. But I mean, she got me. She outwitted, outplayed, and outlasted for sure.
Yeah, it's like it's a hard one because at some point in Survivor, you have to have trust in certain people. You have to have a trust in relationships, and yeah, I'm interested to see how it goes for her long term because it's a really bold decision to take out someone who you have ingrained trust with, and we saw that I guess that conversation happening on the beach with Q and the alleged six. out there around like the trust, and like they spoke really highly of you and someone who was like, he's in, like he's someone who wants to be part of the six. Like, why'd we go against that? How big was the quotation mark six for you?
I mean, honestly, I had a lot of things going. So I was down with the six. I was like, listen, I'm shielded behind these two big men. Hunter challenge beast if I've never seen one, and then Q who's running the show. So like I'm behind them. This is great. If it's a guaranteed way or one of the guaranteed ways to get me to six, I'll do it. If Hunter's all in, I'm all in, and we can do it. So I had that going, and I thought that it was a good idea, but I had other contingency plans like me, Liz, and Hunter had our thing off to the side that was just us. And
Yeah.
what wasn't shown is that on day two on the journey, I asked Maria, does she want to be in an alliance? And I was like, if you pick me for the extra vote when we make it to merge, you and I can work something out later. That so that wasn't in there. And then during the basketball challenge, I saw Maria sit out of that challenge, and that was the only challenge I sat out of. When I saw Maria sit out, I said I would also like to sit out, and I went over there and I asked her, Maria, who did you pick for the extra vote? Did you pick me? And she said, I did. Did you have the vote card? I said, I did. And it wasn't until that moment that we both knew that we had our extra votes. Until then, we didn't actually know for sure. So me and Maria were building a repertoire from day two on through. So I had contingencies in place if the six fell apart, but I was down with the six and getting rid of Soda. I mean, one of the reasons I got rid of Soda was to kind of prove a little bit of trust to the six to say, listen, there's no Nami going on here. Like, let's do the six and let's go.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the extra context. And it's so interesting because that's the stuff where, like, if your placement is different in the show, it's maybe shown, but because you went where you went and the relationship didn't manifest in the way it needs to, it doesn't be shown. So that's why I love doing this because it's so good to hear that. You talked about Soda there again. I just want to jump back a little bit as well because I don't feel like I asked properly, but the Soda vote, why was that so pivotal for you in that moment to take out Soda? Because it did seem like she was willing to work with you and had that relationship. What was it about Soda that I guess excluded her from that three that you had with Liz and Hunter?
So yeah, so with the soda vote is my intention was not to get soda that day, but again, when Q pulled me out of the water and said vote Venus, I said, well, now I can't go after Venus because I don't want Q running my game. He's running
Yeah,
everyone else's game, and I need to make moves for me. And so that was one of the things. I couldn't go after Charlie because, as I said, I was building rapport with Maria. I felt
yeah,
that if I went after Charlie, Maria was going to be rattled. Either the six was because I didn't know Tim was going home. So either the six was going to fall apart, and now I'm definitely going home because Q is mad that I imploded the six because I broke Maria's trust, or Maria doesn't trust me because I've gone against her, and everything that I've worked on since day two is blown up. So Charlie's out of the question for me. Venus felt out of the question for me. I never thought about voting Liz. Maria's safe. I'm not voting for myself. Obviously, you can't. So then that leaves me with Soda. So once my brain went to Soda, then I immediately said, okay, now why is this good for me? Then I said, you know what? I've been saying this whole time that I think Venus and Soda are number ones. Soda came to me and told me that I was her number one, but I think that her and Venus, because they didn't show just how close Venus and Soda were, but they were extraordinarily close. And so I said two things are possible, and one of them is true. Either when you came up to me and told me that I was your number one, you either are lying to me and Venus still is your number one, and you're trying to make me comfortable to get me ejected from the game, or Venus used to be your number one and now you really have made me your new number one, in which case you are willing to cut your number one out of this game if it means you're going to better your position in the game. So there's no way for me to trust you and trust that you have my best interest at heart. So from a viewer perspective, yes, she was an alliance member of mine. From a game perspective, I had no way to prove that. So I stuck with an alliance that I knew that I had, which was with Hunter, who was my number one the whole game.
yeah. So I love that. So thank you for digging into that because it's so interesting. We don't get that perspective necessarily outlaid on the show, and it's interesting because now he doesn't go to tribal council, so we don't see where everything falls. You talked about Hunter there a few times. Like I've spoken to people about Hunter as well. Like I find him like this like unique enigma. He's so I don't know. How like on paper he ticks like every box of what a perfect Jeff Probst survivor would be. But I feel like I don't really know a lot about him. Like, what was it about him out there that made you want to work with him?
You know, when I first saw Hunter, I thought we were not going to get along at all. I thought that he wasn't going to like me because I often get, discarded. I'm flamboyant and I'm eccentric and I'm thin and slender. And so I thought they were going to be like, oh, he's weak, he's not strong, he's not going to be good in challenges, he's going to bring us down. And I thought that's what Hunter was going to do because I noticed that he was very, buff and seemed like he valued hard work. And so it was funny that in the first few moments of us going back to camp and we sit down, we bonded over something so simple and silly and specific as Andy Griffith. So when that happened, I was like, ah, okay. And then we're both very spiritual people, so we bonded over spirituality and we bonded over music and singing. Though he didn't like some of the camp songs, but there were some songs that he and I talked about and kind of sang or did out there. So it Hunter was a surprise to me that he and I were the two that became thick as thieves.
Yeah, I love that though. Sometimes it's like the unexpected relationships are the most fun in
Correct.
Survivor generally. So that's so cool. I haven't mentioned Venus deliberately until this point. You've mentioned her a couple of times. Well, tell me about Venus. So like I loved your moment in the last episode, laughing under the shelter, about everything that was going on. I was like, this kind of like this encapsulates I kind of feel like the Venus edit in this moment where she does kind of feel like to the side people are not really taking her seriously, her game, and she's taking all this credit for these big moves that aren't necessarily her moves. So for you, like what was that relationship like for you as a player out there?
Yeah, I mean, from day one, I mean, from the very first moment of the game, Venus found herself on the bottom because Venus was gone for 30, 40, 50 minutes at a time. And we're all looking around building the shelter or getting firewood or whatever. And we're like, has anybody seen Venus? Do we know? And now we know she was looking for idols, as we saw in the show, which is what we assumed she was doing anyway. So it takes 5 seconds to be on the bottom in Survivor, and she used those 5 seconds to get herself there. And so for me, I came into the game, I said I'm going to be authentically myself. And I had very clear boundaries about how I was going to allow people to approach me, talk to me. I wasn't going to let anyone just treat me any kind of way. So I personally felt that Venus started to cross some of those lines with not only me, but specifically with me and in regards to how she was treating me. And so I said, I'm going to remove myself from this. So there's a deleted scene of Venus pulling me to the side and confronting me about why she's on the bottom. Now, what actually happened is that I pulled Venus to the side to talk to her because I said, you know what, you're playing a game for $1 million. You cannot let yourself get sucked into this, like, you know what, I'm just going to remove them from myself. You have to go face it. So I pulled her to the side. I kept trying to explain my side of things, and I felt that I was being met with a lot of, well, that's just how you're interpreting it. That's not what I'm trying to do. That's just how you're taking it. And I was like, okay, so it was very there was a lot of friction. So I said, you know what, Venus, let's go a little bit further into the woods and let's go sit down and start this over because I really do want to respect you and I want us to have a level of respect between each other. So we went a little further, we sat down, and I said, four things are happening, Venus. There's intention versus impact. I understand you may not intend to, treat me wrong, but the impact is palpable to me. So you need to take accountability for that. And there's also perception versus reality. So we talked about that. I said, how about this, Venus? How about I tell you what I think your problem is with me? You tell me what you think my problem is with you, and let's make sure we understand each other. I said, you feel like I'm treating you like a social pariah. I'm ignoring you. You aren't being seen. You aren't being heard. Boom, boom, boom. Is that correct? She said, yes. I said, Venus, what's my problem with you? She said, I just feel like you're interpreting what I'm doing wrong. I said, okay, how about this? How about we make a safe word? The safe word is sunflower. If I say sunflower, you say sunflower, that means one of us has done something to offend the other one, and then we can clock when it happened, address it, and talk about it when we get a chance to. How do you feel about that? We agreed, we moved on. The last thing I said to Venus before we left that spot was, Venus, nobody would ever suspect you and I working together. You and I can run this game from top to bottom and nobody would ever know it. Do you want to be in an alliance with me? She said yes. We made an alliance. I said, now we go back to camp. Let's not do too much because we don't want to get each other voted out, but let's just, act like we are still on opposite ends of the spectrum. We don't, vibe with each other and let's run the game. So we stormed back to camp, pretending like we were all mad and we didn't like each other, and that's what we did. Until immediately she started throwing my name around and it came right back to me. And I was like, I tried to give you you didn't have anyone else to work with, and I was willing to do that, and you kind of blew that up. So for me, Venus seemed to be a little bit unaware that she's not the only one out there fighting for things, that she's not the only one that has a story and that has feelings. And I think that made her a bit it compounded because we started to pull more away from her, and she started to feel more and more isolated. So, I can understand where the friction came from, but it just kept building and building and building. So that was my relationship. And then after, she kind of kept talking. I tried to help and it didn't work. I just was like, I'm just gonna call it. I'm gonna call it, and that's all I can do for Venus.
Yeah, no, I thank you for going in such depth with that as well. So interesting those conversations as well that happen that don't necessarily get shown because of airing time and other things. But yeah, it is interesting to deconstruct all of that. And and this is a credit to Venus as well. Like to go out there and to be really quite young and to try and play as aggressive as she has, like it's not easy to be taken for anyone to be taken out of their world. So I have full respect for everyone who does this. On a lighter note, it did seem like you had lots of fun out there, which I appreciated, and it definitely shone through on the screen. What are your key memories or takeaways from Survivor, and what's the lasting legacy for you?
I mean, I really feel like I had been saying the whole time when I was out there that there's no way to lose. There's no way for me to lose. I didn't get the $1 million, and that's what it is. But the the things that I have shown myself and the things that I've shown my family and friends and all who watch the show, like you can never judge a book by its cover. I'm proud of the way in which I was physically there, the way in which I was socially there, the way in which I was strategically there. I was so proud of the game that I played. I got to send my dad off with beautiful flowers with that fishing moment that they showed in the show. I got this amazing intro with my voice narrating, which is the first time that's happened and all of these years that Survivor's been on. And for me to narrate the opening season, I mean, there have been amazing moments that I will never forget. And I'm so blessed to have played the game. And like when you go through the game and you play something that you've watched since you were a little boy, I don't know how you can possibly walk away as a loser. I don't think there's a way possible. So um it was difficult. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, and one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And so I'm thankful. Bless God is so good. And I'm just so happy to have played and to have put my stamp on it.